Greetings, sorcerers. Welcome back to the Contested Realm. My name's Jesse Muleman Marshall, and we have another Grand Contest Finals video for you today. This one from Grand Contest Auckland 2026. We just had a fantastic weekend in Auckland last weekend at the Auckland Cardshow with a Grand Contest, a wonderful team sealed event, and a booth displaying some fantastic artwork from Erik, the artistic director and creator of Sorcery Contested Realm. Erik was there in person, as well as myself, Mike and Greg, Sean and Kevin, all from the Erik's Curiosa team, running Learn to Plays, running these fantastic events, including our Grand Contest and Team Sealed, and showcasing some fantastic sorcery artwork. We also had Lindsay Crummett, one of our wonderful sorcery artists, there as well. And it was fantastic to see the New Zealand sorcery and trading card game community coming together at the Auckland Card Show, and in particular, our Grand Contest. Today, we've got the finals from the Grand Contest, which is between Daniel on the Deathspeaker, Henchman online, someone who's very well known to those who've played in the various online sorcery leagues, and we've got Nick as well on the Saviour. So Daniel's playing Deathspeaker, Nick's playing Saviour. Let's dive in. Both of these players had a fantastic run on the Saturday in the Grand Contest. They came back on Sunday morning, fought their way through some very stiff competition with a fantastic spread of different avatars, and made their way all the way to the Grand Final. Take it away. All right, so we have Daniel on the top of our screen here and Nick on the bottom, going through their mulligans. So Daniel playing Deathspeaker, Nick playing Saviour. And we're looking at Daniel mulliganing a couple of sites and a spell by the looks of things. There go those sites, there goes that spell. And then we've got Nick thinking carefully about his mulligans, or perhaps keeping the hand. Oh, electing for a full site mulligan. So 3 sites being mulliganed here by Nick. So we can see in Daniel's hand there a Mirror Realm, at the very least, on the site side of things. Starting off with a step. So Daniel on the play here is the higher seed. So the format here was that the person who finished higher in Swiss chooses to play first or second in the top cut matches. And then one of our new court cards coming down turn 1 for Nick. So that's the Mobbed Court, the Fire Court, which is going to punish either player with life loss whenever they play a unique or elite spell. So straight off, we've got Sister Stephania coming down, and right on cue, that Mobbed Court causing 2 life loss for Daniel, so down to 18. Sister Stephania here, a powerful play for the Deathspeaker player, one that is going to threaten to remove all of the Saviour's wards that Sister Stephania is nearby. And we've got a nice big ward token there coming in from the courtesy of the Guardian CCG. the original use of the ward art on the shield tokens there. So Saviour for Nick here, something he's going to have to be careful of is that Sister Stephania threatening with her Withering Glare to remove any of his wards on the front row. So as soon as Sister Stephania moves up onto site 8, the middle row there, she is going to remove any nearby wards, which is going to mean those middle front 3 sites on Nick's side of the board are pretty much ward-free zones until Nick finds a way to get rid of that Sister Stephania. And in the meantime, of course, she's a useful mobile 2 power unit that's going to be able to chip away at Nick's life total potentially. Although Nick here playing the step off to the side and choosing to adopt a slower start and something of a less aggressive style of play when faced down with Sister Stephania. So very early on there, you can see the impact that Sister Stephania has had on the development of Nick's board. I dare say, and Nick would have to confirm this, but I dare say that for a deck like Saviour, which is playing often a lot more proactive minions that want to get into combat early and are going to be trying to put pressure on particularly a deck like Deathspeaker, playing to the side is not something that Nick would, I presume, do particularly often. But when faced with a turn 2 threat from Daniel like Sister Stephania that's threatening to undermine all of his wards, he made that decision to perhaps develop a little more slowly, but then having that Pit Vipers there on his turn 3 was able to actually develop in the underground region, somewhere that was a bit safer from Sister Stephania's Withering Glare. So Daniel now electing whether to move off to the side with Sister Stephania to keep her safer, or whether to move up onto that pebbled paths that he's now played to put a bit more pressure on potentially. Try and draw that Pit Vipers up from the underground region, or even threaten to be attacking next turn if Nick does try to get a bit more proactive with his own Pit Vipers. So electing, rather than moving off to the funeral pyre, as he was originally considering doing, Daniel now electing to move forward with the Sister Stephania and get proactive. Seeing now here one of the sites from Gothic that has been a little damaged, if you like, or depowered slightly by the existence of the courts, particularly the mobbed court, which has made summoning those 3 power ordinary units off those exceptional sites a little more expensive when a mobbed court is down. But Nick here making good use of that Penitent Knight from his collection via the site's ability and not having to pay a card from hand for it. So we're seeing here now the Sister Stephania coming in for an attack. And of course, that's an interesting play from Daniel, knowing that Sister Stephania is potentially going to lose the ward to a block, or rather to the Penitent Knight defending. But of course, in Deathspeaker, you're expecting here as Nick something like a Vile Imp or some other follow-up to finish off the Penitent Knight. And in fact, it was the 0 mana version, which is the Desert Ping. And then the Arajaro Exorcist comes down as well. So this is something of a feature of Daniel's deck. You know, many traditional Deathspeaker lists that you would have seen earlier on in Alpha and Beta and early Arthurian Legends would have been playing air in Deathspeaker to primarily make use of the wizards. But here Daniel making use of a range of static and Genesis abilities on various minions in Earth and Fire to play a little bit more of a proactive list here. So Arajaro Exorcist and Sister Stephania, both fantastic 2-drops that were released in Gothic in Earth. And we're seeing those already put to great use, as well as, of course, the classic combination of a minion with a desert to take down a bigger minion. And then the Root Spider, another classic play from Nick here, coming down with a ward in the underground region, disabling Sister Stephania, and potentially freeing up that Forsaken Keep to allow Nick to play some more minions with wards and potentially get a bit more proactive himself now that Sister Stephania's ability is offline. Arajaro Exorcist then coming in for 2 on Daniel's turn. And choosing with the Deathspeaker to tap and draw a site here. So a bit of a slower start for both players, which you would think is probably something that Daniel's not unhappy with. Nick has the Root Spider out and the Pit Vipers, so the Root Spider in particular, a very powerful play for him. Pit Vipers, when you combine the Death Touch with Ward, is something that can potentially deliver him a significant amount of card advantage as the game goes on. But that kind of play of trying to nickel and dime advantage off something like a Pit Vipers, less impactful against Deathspeaker, which has the ability to recur minions and get extra value out of them anyway. So Nick probably looking for a little bit more of a haymaker play here, some kind of, now he's up to 5 mana, something a little more proactive to get some more damage in and put some pressure on Daniel so that that long-term advantage that Deathspeaker can generate doesn't come to the fore. So we're seeing here a Hillock Basilisk that's disabling the Sister Stephania as well as the Root Spider, which then frees up the Root Spider to as well as the Root Spider also disabling Sister Stephania, which then frees up the Root Spider to be able to come up from the underground region, attack the Sister Stephania, and because the Root Spider is in the middle of that attack process, it's not at rest. So the Hillock Basilisk is not disabling the Root Spider yet. That then means that the Root Spider is going to fight the Sister Stephania, which is disabled. The Root Spider itself is not going to yet be disabled. The reason it loses its ward is that once it finishes that attack, even though the Sister Stephania didn't strike back because it was disabled, the Hillock Basilisk is now disabling the Root Spider, which removes the ward. So a little bit of a complex interaction there with the double disable and then one disable coming off, but then applying to the other minion. But the players have resolved that correctly, and we now have a no more Sister Stephania and a Root Spider without a ward on that Vindictive Nation. Passing the turn back to Daniel. So in some ways, from Nick's perspective, you know, great to get effectively the kill on Sister Stephania there, but having to play the Hillock Basilisk back onto his home site, so a little bit more of a defensive posture and a place that it's not going to be able to attack from next turn to actually put pressure on Daniel. So if you're in Daniel's seat there, we've had a Root Spider and then a Hillock Basilisk, so 2 turns in a row where really Nick's committed things to the board just to deal with the Sister Stephania and get her off the board. And from that first turn after she was played when Nick went off to the side, and then those 2 turns where we've got the Root Spider and then the Hillock Basilisk coming down, Sister Stephania really occupying a lot of real estate on this board and a lot of tempo in the game. We're now seeing the Fields of Camlan, which gets rid of a couple of the wards, because of course wards prevent destruction, which kill on Fields of Camlan or die, are both synonyms for destroy. So wards will prevent any effect that says kill, die, destroy, things like that, and be removed instead. So Nick lost both of his wards, and then the Violent comes down and gets rid of the Root Spider. So the Pit Vipers and the Hillock Basilisk now both there without wards on them, which is a bit frustrating for Nick, losing that a ward on the Pit Vipers in particular, but the Hillock Basilisk as well, because it just makes them both a little more vulnerable. And it also means Nick's not able to really leverage the advantage from that Pit Vipers by, for example, attacking up into the Violent. Although now that he's got the Hillock Basilisk there, he does somewhat have that ability to do that, although electing not to. So he's played the Autumn Unicorn off to the side here with a ward on it. And again, this is just demonstrating what Nick's deck is able to do and what any Earthfire Savior deck is able to do, leveraging larger minions like Autumn Unicorn, really good rate, and giving it a ward just makes it such a larger threat. You know, if Nick's unable to, if Daniel is unable to remove those wards cheaply, then Nick's able to leverage each of those wards into potentially a card's worth of advantage. But here we're seeing Daniel play the Mirror Realm, which I believe is copying the Fields of Camlan. So Fields of Camlan, already a powerful card, but then getting to Fields of Camlan two turns in a row can be potentially backbreaking here. And of course, out of Deathspeaker, you're not so worried about some of your minions going to the cemetery. You, of course, get a second, at least half use out of them, or in Violimp's case, perhaps a little bit more than half use. But from Nick's perspective, every minion that he loses to 0 mana effects like Fields of Camlan is putting him further and further behind here. So we're seeing the ward get removed off the Autumn Unicorn as part of the die. We're seeing the Hillock Basilisk die, so Nick electing to keep the Pit Vipers rather than the Hillock Basilisk there. And then a double Violimp, so one Violimp recurred, plus another Violimp played from hand, finishes off the Autumn Unicorn, and the Argara Exorcist attacks across for 2. So for 0 mana, 2 turns in a row, Daniel able to affect the board pretty significantly, although, you know, Nick's wards, as far as Fields of Camlan goes, if you get Fields of Camlan twice in a row in other decks that are trying to be proactive, that aren't Savior, you're potentially in a lot more trouble. Because you don't have wards protecting your minions from being killed. The first Fields of Camlan just removed some wards largely. The second one, though, a little bit more damaging. And both of them just chipping away at those sources of card advantage for Nick. The Earthquake here is on that 4x4 region to the left of the middle sites. So it is, although Nick initially signaled with his hand, perhaps not entirely clearly. Daniel, I think, thinking that it was affecting the Fields of Camlan there. It was affecting the Pebbled Paths and the desert in the middle there, and the Vindictive Nation and the Keep. So both of Daniel's minions, the Argara Exorcist and the Violimp, being buried or burrowed, and the Pit Vipers there as well, remaining underground. So Earthquake again, I mean, if you're in Nick's position, you're probably looking at that thinking, I want to be getting a little bit more out of my Earthquake than just killing an Argara Exorcist and a Violimp, which are both going to be able to come back from the cemetery later and do more damage and potentially remove an aura or something else in the case of Argara Exorcist. So yeah, getting off the board is good, particularly with Nick down to 13. But then seeing the Autumn Unicorn come down on Daniel's turn, I'm sure he's wishing that he was able to snag that one as well with a power card like Earthquake. But we're now seeing Nick with an Autumn Unicorn of his own. Of course, these wards, when he's staring down a Violimp in Daniel's cemetery, having the Autumn Unicorn adjacent to the opponent's Autumn Unicorn, but having a ward on his, would normally feel like a great position for Nick. He's saying, well, if you can't get rid of this ward cheaply, then you can't attack into my Unicorn because I'm going to defeat you with my ward. Daniel, of course, has the option here, and Nick knows it, of recurring that Violimp and removing the ward, and then using the Unicorns to trade. But perhaps from Nick's perspective, given the tempo in the game and where things have been at, that he's been feeling a little on the back foot, perhaps he'd be okay with Daniel using a Violimp from the cemetery and his own Autumn Unicorn to remove Nick's. But instead, we're seeing the riposte of another Earthquake from Daniel. So Earthquake coming in. It's not going to do any rearranging. Nick asking Daniel whether he wants to rearrange to lose some life to the Vindictive Nation, but Daniel politely declining, and then getting in for 4 with the Autumn Unicorn. So that feels a little bit here like Nick really is going to be wanting to get proactive this turn. So we're seeing that's a good start. Quarrelsome Kobolds and a Gift of the Serpent. So that is kind of exactly what you wanted to see if you're in Nick's seat. Like, you want to see something that's adding to the board and presenting a threat on future turns, as well as something that's going to deal immediately with that Autumn Unicorn. And that's exactly what a Quarrelsome Kobolds with the Gift of the Serpent does. So a lethal strike from the Kobolds at the end of turn takes out that Unicorn. And now Daniel's actually facing down a Pit Vipers, which isn't terribly threatening in terms of his life total, but more importantly, a Quarrelsome Kobolds, and now a little Foot Soldier. So the board ever so slightly growing in Nick's favor. You know, he's ground out, as Savior tends to want to do, even in the face of the value of Deathspeaker, a little bit of advantage every turn, nickel and diming his way, as I kind of described it earlier, back into a position where he now has 3 minions on the board, and Daniel has 0. And hopefully, with Fields of Camlight and Mirror Realm both out of the way, no site-based ways for Daniel to cheaply and easily, for 0 mana, get rid of all of those minions from Nick's side of the board this time. We did see, of course, both players losing some life there for the Earthquakes as well from the mobbed courts, so both elite spells. And Daniel also losing one from the Argyro Exorcist earlier, which I didn't mention. So that's why Daniel's taken 4, or lost 4 life, all to his own minions. To his own plays. Sister Stephania, Argyro Exorcist, and then the Earthquake. Nick also taking a couple of damage, or losing a couple of life, I should say, from the Earthquake of his own. So now, seeing Firebolts. So we saw Firebolts dealing 3 damage to Nick, taking him down to 6. And now on Nick's turn, we're seeing a Vesuvius coming down. Not the best spot for Vesuvius. Unlikely to be able to get any damage in on Daniel's avatar. But we're seeing a Monks of Cabalsa come down here. Not one you often see in Constructed, but certainly a 4 for 4 if you want more in addition to your Paladins of Barzia, or if you're in Nick's position and you're going all in on the courts and you're saying, I'm going to play lower rarity minions, Paladins of Barzia, the Monks of Cabalsa, I should say, gives you that 4 for 4 minion. You can ward it yourself if you want to. So it can do a Paladins of Barzia impression, and it does have the upside of having its own other ability as well, of not being able to be modified except by wards. So definitely a decent one to consider, particularly if you are running both the mobbed court and the Court of Equity. Seeing Daniel move up here. And Major Explosion is exactly what Nick did not want to see. Oofed. Daniel just chipping away at his life total, including with that Firebolts last turn. Nick doing everything that he could to build up this board presence and try and grind his way back into a position where next turn he was threatening, 6, 7, 8, 9 damage really, if you include the strike for 2 from the Kobolds, plus an extra couple from the Trinket, so up to 11 damage that he was really threatening. And that's without spending any mana whatsoever. And yeah, Nick would have been thinking, well, if I can just get one turn off here, if I can just have a turn where Daniel doesn't have too much to come back at me with, I might be able to get him down to Death's Door potentially next turn. But instead, Nick goes down to Death's Door with that Major Explosion. He's cycling a Gift of the Serpent, looking for options here. I mean, he's still got a decent amount of damage. He can get out of the way here. He's not in Violent range. He's still got 6, 10, 11 off the combination of the monks and the monks, the kobolds, and the pit viper, if he wants to take that. So 3 there, another 4 there. And then we've got 3 coming in at the end of turn from the kobolds, plus the one from the... Oh, we're seeing a smite. So absolutely putting him to Death's Door. So Nick here saying, look, I'm going to commit my mana. I'm going to hope that after you've spent a Firebolt, a Major Explosion, that you don't have another burn spell in hand, but the Minor Explosion comes down and does it for Daniel. Wow. So an epic game where Nick had done everything that he possibly could to grind out a board position where it looked like he was poised for an alpha strike. He was about to put Daniel to death's door next turn, if only he could have Daniel miss for one turn on tempo. But Daniel coolly, calmly, methodically, playing out from that very second turn when he played Sister Stefania, all the way through every turn from then on, chipping in damage for 2 here with our Gyro Exorcist, for 3 there with Firebolts, getting Nick down to the point where he could put him to death's door with the major explosion, and then finish him off with the minor explosion. So an explosive game from both players, Fire, Earth facing off in the finals. Hope you enjoyed that fantastic game of Sorcery Contested Realm, and we'll see you next time. Enjoy contesting the realm.